Imagine waking up every morning and not being able to see the sun. No, this isn't some dystopian movie. This is daily life in Bangladesh, where the air is so thick with pollution that you could literally grab it with your hands. We're talking about a place where rivers run black, where children play in mountains of trash, and where wearing a mask isn't a choice, it's survival. Welcome to what experts call ground zero of the global pollution crisis. This is life in the world's most polluted country, where even breathing comes with a warning label. Bangladesh isn't just dealing with a little smog problem. We're talking about a crisis that's literally off the charts. Get this, in 2023, their capital Dhaka hit pollution levels that were 15 times higher than what's considered safe. But what makes this country of 165 million people the world's dirtiest? Picture this, brick kilns spewing black smoke into the sky, thousands of factories dumping chemicals straight into rivers, and cities drowning in plastic waste. It's like every type of pollution decided to have a party, and Bangladesh is hosting. The numbers are mind-blowing. Over 80,000 people die here every year just from breathing the air. That's like wiping out a small city annually. But here's the crazy part. This wasn't always the case. This is the same land that ancient travelers described as paradise, with lush green deltas and crystal-clear rivers. Now, it's become a toxic cocktail of industrial waste, urban chaos, and environmental nightmares. We're talking about a place where the groundwater in some areas contains so much arsenic that it's basically poison coming out of the tap. And if you think this is just a local problem, think again. Scientists say Bangladesh is like the canary in the coal mine, showing us exactly what happens when rapid development meets zero environmental control. It's a preview of what could happen to other developing nations if they follow the same path. The World Bank calls this a perfect storm of environmental disasters. You've got climate change hitting hard, sea levels rising, and some of the world's most polluted rivers all in one place. Add to that a population density that makes New York City look spacious, and you've got a recipe for what experts are calling an environmental time bomb. Let me take you on a journey through what might be the most extreme environmental crisis on Earth. But brace yourself, what you're about to see will change how you think about pollution forever. Let's dive into what makes Bangladesh's pollution nightmare so unique. First up, the air. Imagine trying to breathe through a wet blanket. That's a good day in Dhaka. The bad days? They're like smoking 2 packs of cigarettes just by walking to work. In 2024, the air quality monitors here broke records, showing numbers so high they seemed like typos. We're talking about pollution levels that make Beijing's worst days look like a mountain retreat. But the air is just the beginning. Let's talk about the rivers, specifically the Buriganga River that runs through Dhaka. Here's a disturbing fact. Scientists found that a single drop of this water contains more bacteria than a toilet bowl. The water runs different colors depending on what the textile factories are producing that day. Blue on Monday, red on Tuesday. It's like a toxic rainbow. There are spots where the pollution is so bad, the water can literally dissolve a metal spoon in under a week. Now, about those textile factories, they're pumping out enough toxic waste to fill 50 Olympic swimming pools every single day. The scary part? Most of this waste comes from making clothes for major Western brands. That $5 t-shirt at your local store? There's a good chance it contributed to turning one of Bangladesh's rivers black. The soil situation isn't any better. Years of uncontrolled industrial dumping have created what scientists call dead zones, areas where nothing can grow. In some places, the ground is so contaminated with heavy metals that it literally changes color. Farmers have discovered their rice fields turning strange shades of purple and orange. And then there's the waste management crisis. Picture the largest landfill you've ever seen. Now multiply it by 10. Some neighborhoods in Dhaka are literally built on garbage. Kids play cricket on mountains of plastic. And during monsoon season, streets become rivers of trash. It's like living in a dystopian movie, except it's very, very real. You might be wondering, how did one country end up with such a massive pollution problem? Well, Bangladesh's location is like a perfect storm of geographical bad luck. Picture this. It's squished between India and Myanmar, with the Bay of Bengal to the south, sitting right in the bullseye of every environmental disaster you can imagine. Here's where it gets wild. Most of Bangladesh is flatter than a pancake. We're talking about a country where the highest natural point in the capital is barely taller than a 5-story building. Why does this matter? Because all that pollution has nowhere to go. It just sits there, like a thick blanket over the cities. During winter, it's like living under a dome of smog that doesn't budge for months. And talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Bangladesh sits right where 3 major river systems meet: the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna. Sounds nice, right? Wrong. These rivers act like pollution highways, bringing in waste from other countries before dumping it all in Bangladesh. It's like being at the bottom of a giant toxic water slide. The climate here doesn't help either. For 6 months, it's bone dry, which means pollution just hangs in the air. Then comes the monsoon season, and all that pollution gets washed into the soil and water. But here's the kicker. Climate change is making everything worse. Rising sea levels are pushing salt water inland, forcing more people into already overcrowded cities. Speaking of overcrowded, Dhaka, the capital, is like sardines in a can if sardines were 22 million people. It's one of the most densely populated cities on Earth, with more people per square mile than almost anywhere else. Imagine trying to keep things clean when you've got the population of New York City squeezed into a space the size of Philadelphia. Let's hop in our time machine and see how Bangladesh went from being called the Golden Bengal to becoming an environmental nightmare. Back in the 1950s, this place was famous for its pristine rivers and lush landscapes. Old photos show crystal clear waters where you could actually see fish swimming. Pretty hard to imagine now, right? But everything changed in the 1970s when Bangladesh said, "Hey, we want in on this global manufacturing game." And boy, did they jump in headfirst. The country went from having a handful of factories to thousands practically overnight. It was like someone pressed fast forward on the Industrial Revolution, but forgot to include the environmental protection chapter. Here's where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean kind of tragic. In the 1980s, big international brands started noticing Bangladesh's cheap labor costs. Suddenly, everyone wanted to set up shop here. The government was so excited about the economic boost that they basically told companies, "Come on in and don't worry too much about those pesky environmental regulations." Get this, by the 1990s, the textile industry was booming so hard that rivers started changing colors based on whatever dye was trendy that season. Local people tell stories about waking up to find their local stream had turned neon pink overnight. It was like a disco party gone horribly wrong. The 2000s brought a whole new level of chaos. The population exploded, cities expanded faster than anyone could plan for, and waste management? Well, let's just say throwing trash in rivers became the unofficial national recycling program. Environmental scientists started calling it the perfect storm of pollution. Every type of environmental disaster you could think of, all happening at once. And here's the real kicker. By the time anyone realized just how bad things had gotten, the damage was already done. It's like the country was so focused on becoming the world's factory that nobody stopped to ask, "Hey, should we maybe keep some trees around?" Now, let's talk money, because this whole pollution mess is tangled up in a pretty twisted economic story. Bangladesh has pulled off something that economists call a miracle. They've become one of the world's fastest growing economies. But here's the dark side. They're literally choking on their own success. Get this. The garment industry here is worth a whopping $40 billion a year. That's right. There's a good chance the shirt you're wearing right now came from one of Bangladesh's 4000+ factories. But here's the thing. Each of these factories is like a mini environmental disaster. They're pumping out enough toxic chemicals to make a hazmat team nervous. And most of them don't even have basic waste treatment systems. Why? Because treating waste costs money, and cheap production is the name of the game. But wait, it gets crazier. Remember those brick kilns I mentioned? There are over 7,000 of them, all belching out smoke like industrial-sized dragons. They're responsible for nearly 60% of Dhaka's air pollution. But here's the catch. They can't shut them down because the country needs millions of bricks for all its new buildings. It's like being stuck between a rock and a toxic place. The numbers are mind-bending. The World Bank says pollution costs Bangladesh about $6.5 billion every year in lost labor and healthcare costs. That's about 4% of their entire economy going up in smoke, literally. But cleaning up would cost even more. and nobody wants to foot that bill. Not the government, not the factory owners, and definitely not the international brands making billions off this system. And here's a twist that'll make your head spin. Some of the world's biggest companies are making record profits while paying Bangladesh's factories so little that they can't afford basic environmental protection. It's like squeezing blood from a stone, except the stone is slowly poisoning everyone around it. Let's get personal for a minute and talk about what it's actually like to live in the world's most polluted country. Imagine being a kid growing up in Dhaka. Your first memory of drawing clouds isn't white fluffy things, but gray smudges, because that's all you've ever seen. The numbers are heartbreaking. Doctors here say they're seeing 15-year-olds with lungs that look like they belong to chain-smoking 60-year-olds. In some neighborhoods, 8 out of 10 kids have permanent respiratory problems. It's so bad that schools have pollution days, like other countries have snow days. When the air gets too toxic, everyone stays home. But it's not just about breathing. People here have gotten creative with survival tactics. Face masks? That's amateur hour. The real pros wear 2 masks, carry portable air purifiers, and check pollution apps like others check the weather. Some families spend half their income on air purifiers and bottled water. Think about that, paying to breathe and drink in your own home. The water situation is a whole other nightmare. Remember those colorful rivers I mentioned? Well, they're not just pretty, they're deadly. Cancer rates in riverside communities are through the roof. Skin diseases are so common, they're basically considered a normal part of life. Some areas have such contaminated groundwater that people have to walk miles just to find safe drinking water. But here's what really gets me: the resilience of these people. They've adapted to living in conditions that would make most of us run screaming. Market vendors wear special gloves because the money is so contaminated with heavy metals. Kids learn to hold their breath when passing certain factories. Families plan their entire days around pollution levels, like checking traffic, but instead of avoiding jams, they're avoiding toxic air pockets. And the most bizarre part? Some people have lived with this for so long, they think it's normal. They'll tell you, "Oh, that burning sensation in your eyes? That's just Tuesday." You might think living in extreme pollution would crush a nation's spirit, but Bangladesh's culture is like a stubborn flower pushing through toxic soil. The way people have adapted their traditions to this environmental nightmare is both fascinating and kind of heartbreaking. Take traditional festivals, for example. The Bengali New Year celebration used to be all about wearing white clothes and dancing in the streets. Now, people wear masks decorated with traditional patterns, and the white clothes, well, they don't stay white for long in Dhaka's air. Some clever artists have even started making pollution masks with traditional Bengali designs. Talk about adapting to the times. Wedding traditions have gotten a pollution makeover too. Outdoor ceremonies? That's so pre-pollution era. Now, families check air quality forecasts like weather reports when planning wedding dates. And those beautiful pre-wedding photo shoots? Photographers have mastered the art of using smog as a natural filter. Though I'm not sure that's something to brag about. Religion has taken an interesting turn too. In a country that's 90% Muslim, the call to prayer now often comes with air quality warnings from mosque loudspeakers. Hindu temples have had to move their outdoor rituals indoors, and some Buddhist meditation gardens now come with air purifiers. It's like spiritual life has had to evolve to survive in this toxic new world. But here's what really shows the cultural impact. Language itself is changing. Bengali, one of the world's most poetic languages, has developed a whole new vocabulary around pollution. Kids grow up learning words for different types of smog before they learn their multiplication tables. There's even street slang about pollution levels. When something's really bad, people say it's Dhaka level dirty. Perhaps the most striking change is in art. Local artists are creating powerful works using pollution itself as a medium. Paintings made with filtered air pollution, sculptures crafted from river waste. It's like they're saying, if we can't beat it, we'll turn it into something meaningful. Government response. Now you might be wondering, where's the government in all this mess? Well, it's complicated. On paper, Bangladesh has some of the strictest environmental laws in Asia. They've got entire books of regulations that would make an environmental lawyer proud. But here's the thing, having rules and enforcing them are two very different games. The Department of Environment has become a master of making announcements. Every few months, they'll declare a war on pollution with fancy press conferences and shiny new initiatives. They've tried everything from banning single-use plastics to threatening to shut down polluting factories. Sounds great, right? But it's like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. Here's the real deal. The government is stuck between a rock and a hard place. They know the pollution is killing people, but they're terrified of slowing down the economy. When they do try to enforce regulations, they run into what locals call the power problem. Powerful industry owners who have more influence than the law itself. In 2022, they launched what they called the Clean Air Act. Impressive name, but most people here joke that it should be called the Clean Air Suggestion. They've installed fancy air quality monitors all over Dhaka, but it's like having a really accurate thermometer while your house is on fire. Interesting data, but not exactly solving the problem. And let's talk about those famous brick kilns. The government ordered them all to use clean technology by 2025. Great plan, except nobody knows who's going to pay for it. Most kiln owners say they can barely afford lunch, let alone million-dollar upgrades. Meanwhile, the smoke keeps rising, and the government keeps setting new deadlines. But it's not all doom and smog. There are actually some pretty amazing solutions popping up across Bangladesh. Let's talk about what's working, because believe it or not, there are some success stories hidden in this toxic mess. First up, there's this incredible project called Rivers of Life. A group of local engineers figured out how to use water hyacinths, yeah, those pesky floating plants, to filter heavy metals out of water. They're literally cleaning rivers with weeds, and it's working. Some test areas have shown a 60% reduction in water pollution levels. Then there's the Green Factory movement. Some factory owners got tired of being the bad guys and started investing in solar power and water treatment systems. One textile factory in Chittagong even created a closed-loop system where they recycle 95% of their water. The crazy part? They're actually making more money now because they're spending less on resources. International help is flowing in too. Japan donated some high-tech air purification systems that they're testing in public spaces. Picture this. Bus stops with clean air bubbles around them. It looks like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it's happening right now in parts of Dhaka. But my favorite solution has to be the Trash for Cash program. Local communities are getting paid to collect plastic waste, which then gets turned into everything from furniture to road construction materials. They've already cleared over 2,000 tons of plastic from rivers. That's like removing 100 full-sized elephants worth of trash. Now, you might be thinking, who in their right mind would vacation in the world's most polluted country? Well, surprisingly, Bangladesh's tourism industry isn't dead. In fact, it's becoming a bizarre kind of destination for what they're calling pollution tourism. Environmental researchers, journalists, and even social media influencers are flocking here to witness what they call the apocalypse preview. Some tour companies have started offering pollution tours, where you can see the world's most contaminated rivers, visit trash mountains taller than buildings, and experience air so thick you can taste it. It's dark tourism taken to a whole new level. But there's more to Bangladesh than just pollution. The country still has some breathtaking places, mostly in the Chittagong Hill Tracts and the Sundarbans mangrove forest. These areas are like stepping into a different world, one where you can actually see the sky. Tourism officials are desperately trying to promote these clean zones while keeping visitors away from the environmental disaster areas. The contrast is mind-bending. You can be in Cox's Bazar, the world's longest natural sea beach, watching a beautiful sunset through a haze of pollution. Or visit the Sundarbans, home to Royal Bengal tigers, while wearing an air pollution mask. Some tourists say it's like visiting two different countries at once, the Bangladesh that was, and the Bangladesh that is. Local guides have even developed a dark sense of humor about it. They'll tell you things like, don't worry about taking pictures of the sunset. The pollution makes every photo look like it has an Instagram filter already applied. Let's peer into Bangladesh's crystal ball. Though with all this pollution, it's pretty cloudy. The future here is shaping up to be either a remarkable comeback story or an environmental cautionary tale. And right now, it could go either way. Scientists are painting a pretty grim picture if things don't change fast. By 2050, they're saying Dhaka might become what they call an uninhabitable zone. fancy science talk for too polluted for human life. We're talking about temperatures hitting 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, regularly, combined with pollution levels that would make today's air look clean in comparison. Some experts are even using the term pollution refugee to describe what might happen to millions of Bangladeshis. But here's where it gets interesting. There's actually some hope on the horizon. Major international brands are finally feeling the heat, pun intended, from consumers and are starting to invest in cleaning up their supply chains. We're talking about billion-dollar commitments to transform those dirty factories into eco-friendly facilities. Tesla's even looking at setting up solar farms here. Talk about a plot twist. The younger generation is stepping up too. There's this amazing group of university students who developed an app that tracks illegal factory emissions and reports them directly to environmental authorities. It's like Uber, but for catching polluters. And get this, it's actually working. They've helped shut down over 100 illegal dumping operations in just 1 year. China went through something similar 20 years ago and managed to turn things around, somewhat. So there's a blueprint to follow. The big question is, can Bangladesh clean up before it's too late? Some optimistic experts say with the right international support and technology, they could cut pollution by 70% in just a decade. So what's the takeaway from all this? Bangladesh isn't just some far-off environmental disaster, it's a wake-up call for all of us. Think about it. Every piece of fast fashion we buy, every piece of plastic we use, every product we purchase without checking its origin, it all connects back to places like this. The good news? You don't have to be a superhero to make a difference. Start small. Check where your clothes come from, support brands that are actually doing something about their environmental impact, and maybe think twice about that $5 t-shirt, because somewhere, someone is paying the real price for that bargain. Want to do more? There are some amazing organizations working on the ground in Bangladesh that could use support. From providing clean water filters to helping set up solar-powered schools, every little bit helps. And hey, spread the word. Share this story, talk about it, make some noise. Because sometimes the first step to solving a problem is making sure people know it exists. Remember those kids playing cricket on mountains of trash? They deserve better. The factory workers breathing in toxic fumes? They deserve better. And honestly, our planet deserves better. Bangladesh might be the canary in the coal mine, but we're all living in the same mine. So next time someone asks you about the world's most polluted country, you won't just have facts, you'll have the whole story. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be part of writing its next chapter.